Ethan Cole never imagined that returning to the cabin during a storm just to finish a repair job would turn into a fight for survival. Aria Vaughn, the billionaire author known for her cold precision, was being hunted by an obsessed fan right inside her own home. The power was cut, the generator sabotaged, and he was out there, somewhere in the darkness. Could a single father with a contractor's hands protect her before it was too late? Follow this story to the end, hit like, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The storm hit the mountain harder than the forecast predicted. Ethan Cole gripped the steering wheel as his truck crawled up the narrow dirt road, headlights cutting through sheets of rain that looked more like falling walls than water. The windshield wipers were useless. Every few seconds, a gust of wind shoved the truck sideways, and he had to correct before the tires found the edge where the road dropped into nothing. He should have turned back an hour ago, but he'd left his good drill at the Vaughn cabin, and he needed it for tomorrow's job. He couldn't afford to replace it. Not with Sophie's tuition payment coming up and the truck payment already 2 weeks late. So here he was, driving into a storm that was quickly becoming something worse. The cabin appeared through the trees like a ghost, dark, isolated, perched on the ridge with nothing but forest and cliffs around it. No lights. That was strange. Aria Vaughn had been there when he left earlier that afternoon, working in her office with that sharp, silent focus she always had. She never left the lights off. Ethan parked near the side entrance and killed the engine. Rain hammered the roof. He pulled his hood up, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out into the storm. The cold hit him first, then the wind, shoving him back against the truck. He lowered his head and pushed toward the cabin, boots sinking into mud with every step. The side door was unlocked. That stopped him. Aria Vaughn didn't leave doors unlocked. She barely left doors open. In the 3 weeks he'd been working on the cabin, she'd never once forgotten to lock up behind him when he left for the day. She was careful, methodical, the kind of person who checked things twice. Ethan pushed the door open. "Ms. Vaughn?" No answer. He stepped inside, shaking rain off his jacket. The cabin was silent except for the storm. No hum from the refrigerator. No lights. Power must have gone out. "Ms. Vaughn!" he called again, louder this time. Still nothing. He moved through the mudroom into the kitchen, flashlight beams sweeping across granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Everything looked normal, clean, untouched. Then he saw the basement door. It was open. Just a crack. But enough. Ethan crossed the kitchen and pulled it wider. Stairs descended into darkness. He aimed the flashlight down. "Hello?" A sound, faint, like something scraping. He went down. The basement was unfinished, concrete floors, exposed beams, stacks of storage boxes along one wall. And in the far corner, near the breaker panel, Aria Vaughn was crouched on the floor with a flashlight of her own, staring at something Ethan couldn't see yet. She turned when she heard him. Her face was pale, tight with something that looked like fear but was trying hard not to be. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but there was a crack in it. "I left my drill," Ethan said. "Door was open. You all right?" She didn't answer right away, just looked at him, then back at whatever she'd been staring at. Ethan walked closer. The breaker panel was open. Wires hung loose, cut clean through. Not torn, not damaged by a surge. Cut, deliberately. "Someone did this," Aria said quietly. Ethan crouched beside her, examining the wires. "Yeah, someone did." "The generator, too," she added. "I checked it an hour ago. Fuel line's been sliced." Ethan's chest tightened. "You call anyone?" "No signal. Storm must have knocked out the cell tower." She stood, brushing dust off her jeans. "I was about to try the landline." "There's a landline?" "In the office." They went upstairs. Aria moved fast, like she was trying to outrun the fear that was clearly sitting just under her skin. Ethan followed, his mind already working through what he'd seen. Cut wires. Sabotaged generator. Someone had been here. Someone who didn't want her to have power. Or contact with the outside. The office was at the front of the cabin, a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the valley. Or would have if the storm wasn't turning the view into a wall of black. Aria picked up the landline. listened, then set it down. Dead, she said. Ethan felt the weight of that settle between them. No power, no phone, no way out until the storm passed. Who would do this? He asked. Arya didn't answer right away. She walked to the window, arms crossed, staring out at nothing. I don't know, she said finally, but the way she said it made Ethan think she had an idea. She just didn't want to say it out loud. He gave her a minute, then asked, You been having trouble with anyone? She turned, her expression unreadable in the dim flashlight glow. Why would you ask that? Because someone cut your power and your generator and your phone line. That's not random. Arya's jaw tightened. I'm a public figure. I get letters, messages. Some of them aren't pleasant. Threatening? Sometimes. You report them? When they're serious, yes. And lately, she hesitated, then nodded. There's been one, more persistent than the others. What does he want? To rewrite my book. Her voice was flat, like she was trying to strip the emotion out of it. He thinks the ending is wrong, that I stole his story, that I owe him the real version. Ethan stared at her. And you think he's here? I don't know. She turned back to the window. But I don't think this is a coincidence. Neither did Ethan. He moved to the window beside her, scanning the tree line. Rain blurred everything, but if someone was out there, they wouldn't be easy to spot. Not in this. We need to secure the cabin, he said. Check every window, every door. Make sure nothing's open that shouldn't be. I already checked. We'll check again. She looked at him, and for the first time since he'd arrived, something in her face softened. Not much, but enough. You don't have to stay. Yeah, I do. Why? Because you're here alone and someone just cut your power. I can handle myself. I'm sure you can, but you don't have to. She studied him for a long moment, like she was deciding whether to trust him or tell him to leave. Finally, she nodded. All right. They started in the office, checking the windows, all locked. Then moved through the rest of the cabin, living room, kitchen, bedrooms, bathrooms. Every window was secure. Every door was locked except the one Ethan had come through. But in the guest bedroom, they found something. The window was closed, but the latch was broken. Fresh scratches marked the frame, like something had been pried at it. This wasn't like this before, Arya said, her voice tight. Ethan ran his fingers over the scratches. No, it wasn't. He checked the window more carefully. It wasn't open, but it wasn't secure either. If someone pushed hard enough, it would give. I can fix this, Ethan said. You have any tools? In the garage. Show me. The garage was attached to the cabin through a covered walkway. Inside, Ethan found what he needed: wood screws, a hammer, some spare 2x4s. He grabbed what he could carry and went back to the guest bedroom. Arya watched as he reinforced the window, screwing a length of wood across the frame so it couldn't be opened from the outside. It wasn't pretty, but it would hold. You do this kind of thing often? She asked. Fix windows? Barricade people inside their own homes. Ethan almost smiled. First time. Lucky me. He finished the last screw and tested the frame. Solid. We should do the same to the other windows. Any place that's vulnerable. That's a lot of windows. Better safe than sorry. She nodded. All right. They worked through the cabin, reinforcing every ground-level window they could reach. It took over an hour. By the time they finished, Ethan's hands were sore and his shirt was soaked with sweat despite the cold. Arya brought him a glass of water. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We still don't know if he's out there. He is. Ethan looked at her. How do you know? She pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. Ethan unfolded it. The handwriting was jagged, angry, written in thick black ink. You changed the ending. You killed him when he was supposed to live. You owe me the truth. I'm coming to take it back. Ethan's stomach dropped. When did you find this? This afternoon. It was slid under the front door. And you didn't leave? I thought about it, but I've been running from this for weeks. I thought maybe if I stayed, if I waited, I could. I don't know. Confront it. Prove to myself I wasn't afraid. And now? She looked at him, and in that moment, Ethan saw the truth she was trying to hide. She was afraid. Terrified, even. But she was also stubborn as hell. Now I'm glad you came back for your drill, she said quietly. Ethan folded the note and handed it back. We need to stay together. No splitting up. We don't go anywhere alone. Understood? Understood. And if something happens, if we hear something, if someone tries to get in, we don't hesitate. We move fast, we move smart, and we don't take chances. You sound like you've done this before. I haven't, but I've spent enough time on job sites to know when something's about to go wrong. And you think something's about to go wrong? Ethan looked toward the windows where the storm raged against the glass. Yeah, I do. They moved to the living room where the fireplace was. Ethan got a fire going, more for light than warmth, though the cabin was getting colder by the minute. Arya sat on the couch, arms wrapped around herself, staring into the flames. You have kids? She asked suddenly. Ethan looked up from the fire. A daughter, Sophie, she's 8. Where is she tonight? With her grandparents? My late wife's parents? They take her a few nights a week. I'm sorry about your wife. It's been 4 years. That doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. They were quiet for a moment. Then Arya said, You're a good father. How do you know? Because you came back for a drill in the middle of a storm so you wouldn't miss a job tomorrow. That's not about the drill. That's about making sure your daughter has what she needs. Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded and went back to the fire. An hour passed, then 2. The storm didn't let up. If anything, it got worse. Wind howled through the trees, shaking the cabin's walls. Rain hammered the roof like fists. And then they heard it. A sound. Faint, coming from somewhere outside. Ethan stood, flashlight in hand. Stay here. No. Arya was on her feet too. We stay together. You said so yourself. He couldn't argue with that. They moved toward the sound through the kitchen to the mudroom. Ethan opened the side door carefully, just a crack, and aimed the flashlight outside. Nothing. Just rain. Just wind. But then he saw it. Footprints. Fresh. Leading from the tree line to the side of the cabin, then around toward the back. Someone had been here. Recently. Ethan pulled the door shut and locked it. We need to move away from the windows. Why? Because whoever made those tracks is circling the cabin. Arya's face went white. He's looking for a way in. Yeah, he is. They moved to the center of the cabin where there were no windows. The hallway between the bedrooms. Ethan positioned himself so he could see both ends. The living room on one side, the kitchen on the other. What do we do? Arya asked. We wait. We listen. And if he tries to get in, we stop him. How? Ethan pulled a hammer from his tool belt. With this if I have to. Arya stared at the hammer, then at him. You're serious. Dead serious. Another sound, this time from the back of the cabin. A scraping noise, like something being dragged across wood. Ethan moved toward it, Arya right behind him. They reached the back hallway just in time to see the door at the end, the one leading to the back deck, rattle in its frame. Someone was trying to get in. Ethan shone the flashlight at the door. The handle turned, slowly, testing. Then it stopped, and everything went silent. Ethan's heart was pounding. He kept the flashlight steady, kept his breathing even, kept his body between Arya and the door. The silence stretched. Then the door exploded inward. Not all the way, just enough. The lock held, but the frame splintered and a hand reached through the gap, clawing at the air. Arya screamed. Ethan didn't think. He lunged forward, bringing the hammer down hard on the hand. There was a sickening crack, and the hand jerked back, disappearing into the darkness. A voice followed, low, distorted. You can't keep me out, Arya. This is my story. You stole it, and I'm taking it back. Then footsteps, running, fading into the storm. Ethan slammed his shoulder into the door, forcing it shut. The frame was damaged, but it held. He jammed a chair under the handle and stepped back, breathing hard. Arya was shaking. He was right there. He was... I know. Ethan grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. But he's gone. for now. He'll come back. Probably, but we'll be ready. How? Ethan looked around the cabin, his mind racing. They couldn't just wait. They couldn't just defend. If this guy was serious, and everything pointed to him being very serious, then waiting meant dying. They needed a plan. We set traps, Ethan said. We make it harder for him to get in. And if he does, we make sure he regrets it. Traps? I'm a contractor. I know how to make things fall apart. I can make them fall apart on purpose, too. Arya stared at him, then nodded. Okay, tell me what to do. They worked fast. Ethan pulled furniture, moved shelves, stacked anything heavy near the doors. He rigged a tripwire in the back hallway using fishing line from the garage, tied to a stack of paint cans that would crash down if anyone stepped through. He wedged screws into the door frame at ankle height, points out, hidden in shadow. He found a can of WD-40 and sprayed the deck outside the back door until it was slick as ice. It wasn't much, but it was something. Arya helped where she could, following his instructions without question. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Ethan realized she wasn't the cold, distant woman he'd thought she was. She was just scared, and doing everything she could not to show it. By the time they finished, it was past midnight. The storm was still raging, and the cabin felt less like a home and more like a fortress. Ethan and Arya sat in the living room, backs against the couch, facing the windows. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows across the walls. "Why are you doing this?" Arya asked quietly. "Doing what?" "Staying, helping. You could have left hours ago." "And leave you here alone with that guy outside?" "You don't know me." "No, but I know what it's like to be afraid and not want to be." She looked at him, her expression softer now, tired. "I'm not used to people staying." "Then maybe you've been around the wrong people." She smiled. "Just a little." "Maybe." They sat in silence for a while. Then Arya said, when we get through this, I owe you a drink." "I don't drink." "Then coffee." "Deal." Another hour passed. The storm began to ease just slightly. The wind wasn't as vicious, the rain wasn't as heavy, but the quiet was worse. Because quiet meant waiting, and waiting meant wondering when the next attack would come. Ethan's eyes were heavy. He hadn't slept in over 20 hours, and the adrenaline was starting to fade. But he couldn't afford to sleep. Not yet. Arya was leaning against his shoulder now, her breathing slow and steady. She'd fallen asleep at some point, and Ethan hadn't had the heart to wake her. He kept watch, kept his flashlight ready, kept the hammer within reach, and waited. The next sound came just before dawn. A crash. From the kitchen. Ethan jerked upright, and Arya woke with a gasp. "What was that?" she whispered. "Stay here." "Ethan, stay here." He moved toward the kitchen, hammer in hand, flashlight cutting through the darkness. His pulse was hammering in his ears. His hands were steady, but his mind was screaming at him to turn around, to get out, to run. He didn't. He reached the kitchen. The window above the sink was broken. Glass covered the counter. And standing in the middle of the room, soaked and bleeding from the hand Ethan had hit earlier, was a man. He was thin, gaunt. His eyes were wild, unfocused, like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. He was holding something, a knife, long, serrated, the kind you used for cutting meat. "You're in my way," the man said. His voice was hoarse, broken. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you," Ethan said. The man smiled. It was the worst thing Ethan had ever seen. "She stole from me. She took my story, my ending, and I'm here to take it back." "She doesn't owe you anything." "Yes, she does." The man lunged. Ethan barely had time to react. He swung the hammer, and it connected with the man's shoulder, sending him stumbling back into the counter. The knife clattered to the floor. But the man didn't stop. He came again, wild and reckless, grabbing for Ethan's throat. They crashed into the table. Chairs splintered. Ethan's flashlight flew across the room and everything went dark except for the faint glow from the living room fire. Ethan felt the man's hands around his neck, squeezing, and he brought his knee up hard into the man's ribs. Once. Twice. The grip loosened. Ethan shoved him off and scrambled for the hammer. The man grabbed the knife. And then Arya was there. She came out of nowhere, a cast iron skillet in both hands, and she swung it like a bat, catching the man across the side of the head with a sound that echoed through the cabin. The man dropped. Ethan grabbed the knife and kicked it away. Then he rolled the man over, checking for a pulse. Still breathing, but out cold. Arya stood over them, skillet still raised, chest heaving. Is he alive? Barely. She lowered the skillet slowly, like she didn't quite believe it was over. We need to tie him up. Yeah, we do. They found rope in the garage and bound the man's hands and feet. Ethan dragged him into the corner of the living room where they could keep an eye on him until help arrived. By the time they finished, the storm had passed. The sky outside was beginning to lighten, turning from black to gray. And in the distance, Ethan could hear sirens. Arya must have heard them too. She sank onto the couch, skillet still in her lap, and started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, shaking tears that she tried to hide behind her hands. Ethan sat beside her. He didn't say anything. He just sat there, close enough that she knew she wasn't alone. After a while, she looked at him. Her face was pale, streaked with tears and exhaustion. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. You saved my life. You saved mine too. That skillet shot was perfect. She laughed. It was small, broken, but real. I played softball in college, I can tell. The sirens grew louder, and then they were there, police cars, an ambulance, lights flashing through the trees. Help had arrived. But as Ethan watched the paramedics load the unconscious man into the ambulance, as he answered the officer's questions and gave his statement, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not just in the cabin, but between him and Arya. She stood on the porch, wrapped in a blanket someone had given her, watching everything with that same sharp, silent focus she always had. But when her eyes found his, something was different. She wasn't looking at him like a contractor anymore. She was looking at him like someone who just stood beside her in the worst night of her life. And Ethan didn't know what to do with that. So he did what he always did. He nodded. He grabbed his drill from the mudroom where he'd left it a lifetime ago, and he walked toward his truck. Ethan. He stopped, turned. Arya was standing at the edge of the porch, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. Where are you going? Home. My daughter's probably wondering where I am. Will you come back to finish the repairs? He hesitated, because the honest answer was he didn't know. Coming back meant seeing her again. And seeing her again meant remembering what it felt like to stand in that hallway with her, ready to fight, ready to protect, ready to die if it came to that. And that was dangerous, because Ethan had spent 4 years making sure he didn't get close to anyone. It was easier that way, safer. But then Arya said, I'd like you to, if you're willing. And Ethan found himself nodding. Yeah, I'll come back. She smiled, small, tired, but real. And as Ethan drove down the mountain, the storm finally breaking behind him, he realized something. For the first time in 4 years, he didn't feel alone. 3 days after the attack, Ethan stood in his kitchen making breakfast for Sophie, trying to pretend everything was normal. The eggs were burning. He'd forgotten to flip them, too busy staring out the window at nothing. Dad, they're smoking, Sophie said from the table. Ethan jerked back to reality and yanked the pan off the burner. Black smoke curled toward the ceiling. He dumped the ruined eggs into the sink and started over. Sorry, sweetheart. You've been weird since Tuesday, Sophie observed. She was 8, but she noticed everything, too much sometimes. I'm not weird. You are. You keep staring at stuff, and you forgot to pick me up from Grandma's yesterday. Grandpa had to drive me home. Ethan closed his eyes. He had forgotten, completely. I'm sorry. It's okay, but what's wrong? He cracked 2 more eggs into the pan, watching them sizzle. Just tired. Work stuff. The cabin lady? He looked at her. What? Grandma said you were at the cabin when the storm happened, the one with the rich lady who writes books. Asumolat. Of course, his mother-in-law had told her. Barbara couldn't keep anything to herself. Yeah, that one. Did something bad happen? Ethan hesitated. Sophie didn't need to know about the attack, the broken window, the man with the knife. She didn't need to carry that. The storm was pretty rough, but we're both fine. Then why do you look sad? I'm not sad. You look sad. He slid the eggs onto a plate and set it in front of her. Eat your breakfast. She picked up her fork but didn't start eating. Do you like her? Who? The cabin lady. Ethan sat down across from her, his own plate untouched. I don't really know her. But do you like her? Sophie, because Mom would want you to be happy. She told me that before she got really sick. Ethan's throat tightened. He didn't talk about Sarah much. It hurt too much. And Sophie was too young to remember most of it. But sometimes she said things like this, things that gutted him. Your mom was a good person, he said quietly. I know, but she wouldn't want you to be alone forever. I'm not alone. I have you. You know what I mean? He did, but he didn't know what to say to it, so he just reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Eat your eggs before they get cold. She smiled and started eating. And Ethan sat there, trying not to think about Aria Vaughn standing on that porch in a blanket, asking him to come back. He went back to the cabin on Friday. Not because he wanted to, because he had a job to finish. He'd promised to repair the deck, replace the cracked tile in the guest bathroom, and fix the banister on the front steps. The fact that Aria Vaughn had almost been killed 3 nights ago didn't change the contract. At least, that's what he told himself. The cabin looked different in daylight. Less like a fortress, more like what it was, a beautiful, expensive house on a mountain ridge. The windows he'd boarded up had been repaired. The back door had been replaced entirely. Someone had cleaned up the broken glass in the kitchen. Ethan parked his truck and grabbed his toolbox. Before he could knock, the front door opened. Aria stood there, dressed in jeans and a gray sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, thinner than she had before, but steady. You came? She said. I said I would. I know, but I wasn't sure you meant it. Ethan shifted his weight. I always mean it when I say something. She smiled faintly. Good to know. She stepped aside. Come in. He followed her inside. The cabin smelled like coffee and wood polish. The living room had been put back together, furniture rearranged, fire poker returned to its stand, blood stain scrubbed from the floor. Coffee? Aria asked. Sure. She poured him a cup from the pot in the kitchen. Black, no sugar. She remembered. How have you been? Ethan asked, taking the mug. Busy. Police came back yesterday with more questions. My lawyer's been calling non-stop, and my publicist wants me to do an interview about what happened. You going to? No, I don't owe anyone that story. Ethan nodded. Good. They stood in the kitchen, both holding coffee mugs, neither quite sure what to say next. Finally, Aria broke the silence. I haven't been sleeping. Me neither. Every time I close my eyes, I see him standing there, in the dark, with that knife. Ethan set his mug down. That's normal, after something like that. Does it go away? I don't know. I've never been through something like that. But you've lost someone. Your wife. He looked at her, surprised. How did you... You mentioned her, that night. You said she passed 4 years ago. Yeah, cancer. I'm sorry. You already said that. I know, but I mean it. Ethan picked up his mug again, just to have something to hold. The hurt doesn't go away. You just learn to carry it differently. That's not very comforting. No, but it's true. Aria studied him for a long moment. Then she said, Thank you for being honest. I don't know how to be anything else. She smiled. A real one this time. I'm starting to see that. Ethan spent the rest of the morning working on the deck. The boards were warped from moisture, and 2 of the support beams needed replacing. It was straightforward work, the kind that let his mind wander while his hands stayed busy. Aria worked in her office. He could see her through the window, sitting at her desk, staring at her laptop screen like it had personally offended her. Every so often, she'd type something, then delete it and start over. Around noon, she came outside with sandwiches. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said, wiping sawdust off his hands. I know, but I was making lunch anyway. They sat on the steps, the ones he hadn't fixed yet, and ate in silence for a while. The view from the cabin was stunning. Miles of forest, mountains in the distance, sky so blue it looked fake. "You ever think about leaving?" Ethan asked. "The cabin?" "Yeah. Every day since Tuesday." She took a bite of her sandwich, chewed slowly. "But I won't." "Why not?" "Because if I leave, he wins. He wanted me afraid, wanted me to run, and I'm done running from people who think they own pieces of me." Ethan looked at her. "That happen a lot? People thinking they own pieces of you?" "More than you'd think. Readers get attached. They feel like they know you because they've read your books. Some of them think that gives them rights to your time, your attention, your story." She paused. "One guy showed up at a book signing and told me he'd named his daughter after my main character. Then he asked if I'd come to her baptism. What'd you say?" "I said no, and he called me a selfish bitch in front of 200 people. Ethan shook his head. "That's insane. That's fame, or whatever version of it I have." "You regret it, the writing?" "No, but I regret how visible it made me. I used to think privacy was something you gave up by choice. Turns out people just take it." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. His life was the opposite, quiet, small, anonymous. Nobody cared what he did or where he went as long as the work got done. "You're lucky," Arya said, like she was reading his mind. "Am I?" "You get to just be. Nobody's watching. Nobody's waiting for you to mess up so they can write about it online. Nobody's writing 7-figure checks either." She laughed. It was brief, but genuine. "Fair point." They finished their sandwiches. Arya gathered the plates and stood. "I should let you work." "Yeah, I've got a lot to get through." But she didn't leave right away. She stood there, looking out at the trees, her expression distant. "What?" Ethan asked. "Nothing, just..." She hesitated. "It's nice. Having someone here. I didn't realize how quiet it's been." "You live alone?" "Most of the time. Sometimes my assistant comes up for a few days, but she's in New York this week." She looked at him. "Do you ever get lonely?" Ethan thought about it. "Yeah, but I'm used to it." "That's not the same as being okay with it." "No, it's not." She nodded slowly, like she understood exactly what he meant. Then she went inside and Ethan went back to work. By late afternoon, the deck was nearly done. Ethan was securing the last board when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen. "Barbara." He answered. "Hey, where are you?" His mother-in-law's voice was tight, worried. "Working. What's wrong?" "Sophie's school called. She's in the nurse's office. Says her stomach hurts." Ethan's chest clenched. "Is she okay?" "They think it's just nerves, but they want someone to pick her up. I'm on my way." He hung up and started packing his tools. Arya appeared in the doorway. "Everything all right?" "My daughter's sick. I need to go." "Of course. Go." Ethan hesitated. "I'll come back Monday to finish." "Don't worry about it. Take care of her." He nodded and headed for his truck. But as he drove down the mountain, he couldn't shake the image of Arya standing in that doorway, watching him leave, alone again. Sophie wasn't sick. She was anxious. The school nurse explained it while Sophie sat on the cot, pale and small, and refusing to meet Ethan's eyes. She'd been having stomach aches all week. The school counselor thought it might be stress. "Stress about what?" Ethan asked. The nurse gave him a look, the kind that said, "You're the parent, you should know." Ethan signed Sophie out and drove her home in silence. When they got there, he made her tea and sat across from her at the kitchen table. "Talk to me," he said. Sophie stared into her mug. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "That something bad's going to happen to you." Ethan's heart sank. "Why would you think that?" "Because of the storm and the cabin. Grandma said there was a bad man there. He was going to kill Barbara. Grandma shouldn't have told you that. But it's true, right?" Ethan didn't want to lie, but he didn't want to scare her either. "Yeah, it's true. But the police took him away. He can't hurt anyone now." "But what if there's another bad man? What if something happens and you don't come home?" Her voice cracked, and Ethan realized this wasn't just about the cabin. This was about Sarah. about watching her mother get sick and never come home from the hospital. He reached across the table and took Sophie's hand. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I promise. You can't promise that. Yes, I can, because I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I'm here for you every single day. Sophie looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks. I don't want to lose you too. You won't. He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight while she cried into his shoulder. And he made himself a promise right there. Whatever was happening with Arya, whatever pull he felt toward her, it couldn't come at Sophie's expense. His daughter came first. Always. That weekend, Ethan didn't go back to the cabin. He stayed home with Sophie. They made pancakes on Saturday morning, went to the park in the afternoon, watched movies that night. Sunday, they drove to the lake and skipped stones until the sun went down. Sophie seemed better, less tense, more like herself. But Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Arya, alone in that cabin, staring at her laptop, fighting whatever was keeping her from writing. On Sunday night, after Sophie went to bed, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It's Arya. Got your number from the contractor file. Hope that's okay. Ethan stared at the screen, then typed back. It's fine. Everything okay? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I finished the chapter I've been stuck on for 2 weeks. Thought you'd want to know. That's good. It's because of you. Ethan didn't know what to say to that. So he just sent back, glad I could help. Another pause. Then, are you coming back Monday? He should have said no. Should have told her he'd send someone else to finish the job. Should have kept the distance that was smart and safe and necessary. Instead, he typed, yeah, I'll be there. Monday morning came too fast. Ethan dropped Sophie at school, watched her walk through the doors with her backpack bouncing, and felt the familiar ache of guilt settle in his chest. He was leaving her. Again. For work. For money. For Arya. No. Not for Arya. For the job. He repeated that to himself the entire drive up the mountain. When he arrived, Arya was waiting on the porch. She had coffee ready. 2 mugs. You remembered, Ethan said, taking one. Hard to forget. You drink it like motor oil. He smiled despite himself. It's efficient. They stood there drinking coffee, not talking. It should have been awkward, but it wasn't. Finally, Arya said, I'm glad you came back. You already paid me. I had to finish the job. That's not why you came back. Ethan looked at her. No? No. She held his gaze. You came back because you wanted to. He didn't deny it. Couldn't. What chapter did you finish? She blinked, surprised by the shift. The one where the main character realizes she's been running from the wrong thing. What was she running from? Herself. Arya took a sip of coffee. Turns out, the hardest person to face is the one in the mirror. That true for you too? She smiled faintly. What do you think? Ethan thought about the woman he'd met 3 weeks ago. Cold, distant, controlled, and the woman standing in front of him now, still guarded, but softer, more real. I think you're braver than you give yourself credit for, him, he said, and I think you're kinder than you realize. They held each other's gaze for a moment too long. Then Arya broke away, clearing her throat. You should probably get to work. Yeah, probably. But neither of them moved. Finally, Ethan set his mug down and grabbed his toolbox. Banister first, then the tile. Sounds good. He worked through the morning, replacing the rotted wood on the front steps, sanding down the rough edges, applying a fresh coat of stain. Arya stayed inside, writing, but every so often, Ethan would glance up and see her watching him through the window. Around 1, she brought out lunch again. Sandwiches and chips. You're going to spoil me, Ethan said. Consider it hazard pay for saving my life. I didn't. You did. She sat beside him on the steps. Don't downplay it. Ethan unwrapped his sandwich. You hit him with a skillet. That counts too. I was aiming for his head. Got lucky. Didn't look like luck to me. She smiled. Softball, varsity, 4 years. You mentioned that. Did I? Yeah, right after you knocked him out. They ate in comfortable silence. The sun was warm, the breeze cool. It felt almost normal, like they were just 2 people having lunch, not two people who'd fought off a lunatic together. "Can I ask you something?" Arya said after a while. "Sure." "Do you ever think about that night?" "Every day." "Me too." She picked at the crust of her sandwich. "I keep replaying it, wondering what would have happened if you hadn't come back. If you just left your drill and gone home. Don't do that to yourself. I can't help it." Ethan set his sandwich down. "You would have figured it out. You're smart, resourceful. You would have survived." "You don't know that." "Yeah, I do, because you didn't panic. You didn't freeze. You fought back. That's not something you learn. That's who you are." Arya looked at him, her eyes bright with something that might have been tears. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. Not the writer. Not the billionaire. Just me." Ethan didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded and picked up his sandwich again. They finished lunch. Arya went back inside, and Ethan tried very hard not to think about the fact that he was starting to care about her. Really care, in a way that felt dangerous and inevitable all at once. By late afternoon, the banister was done. Ethan moved inside to work on the tile in the guest bathroom. The cracked piece was behind the toilet, which meant pulling the whole fixture out to replace it. He was halfway through when Arya appeared in the doorway. "Need help? You know how to replace tile?" "No, but I can hand you tools." "That's not necessary." "I know, but I'm bored." She stepped inside and sat on the edge of the tub. "Besides, I've been staring at a blank screen for an hour. I need a break." Ethan didn't argue. He walked her through what he was doing, explaining each step as he worked. Arya listened, asked questions, handed him the right tool at the right time. "You're good at this," she said after a while. "It's just tile. I don't mean the work. I mean teaching, explaining. You're patient. I have an 8-year-old. Patience is survival." Arya smiled. "What's she like?" "Your daughter." Ethan paused, trowel in hand. "She's smart, funny, stubborn as hell, looks just like her mom." "Do you talk about her, your wife?" "With Sophie? Sometimes. Not as much as I should." "Why not?" "Because it hurts. And I don't want Sophie to see me hurt." "She already does. Kids notice everything." Ethan knew that, but hearing someone else say it made it real. "Yeah, she does." "Sarah would want you to talk about her," Arya said quietly. "She'd want Sophie to know who she was." Ethan looked at her. "You didn't know Sarah?" "No, but I know what it's like to be forgotten, to have people erase you because remembering is hard." There was weight in her voice, something old and unhealed. Ethan wanted to ask, but he didn't. "Some wounds you didn't poke at." He went back to the tile. "I'll talk to Sophie, when the time's right." "Good." They worked in silence after that. When the tile was set and the grout was drying, Ethan cleaned up his tools and washed his hands in the kitchen sink. Arya leaned against the counter watching him. "You're almost done here, aren't you?" "One more day, maybe 2. "And then?" "Then I move on to the next job." She nodded slowly. "Right, of course." Ethan dried his hands on a towel. "Why? You need something else fixed?" "No, I just—" She hesitated. "I'll miss having you around. That's all." Ethan's chest tightened. "Arya, I know, you have a life, a daughter. I'm just a client." "That's not what I was going to say." She looked at him. "Then what were you going to say?" Ethan didn't know, because the truth was messy and complicated and terrifying. The truth was he'd been thinking about her for days. The truth was he didn't want to finish this job and walk away. But the truth was also that he had Sophie, and Sophie needed stability, not her dad getting tangled up with a woman who lived in a different world. "I don't know," he said finally. "I'm still figuring it out." Arya's expression softened. "That's fair." Ethan picked up his toolbox. "I should go. Sophie's got soccer practice." "Okay." Arya walked him to the door. "Same time tomorrow?" "Yeah." He made it halfway to his truck before she called his name. "Ethan." He turned. She was standing on the porch, arms crossed, looking uncertain in a way he'd never seen before. "If you ever want to bring her, Sophie, up here, you can. There's a trail behind the cabin. Good for hiking. She might like it. Ethan stared at her. You want me to bring my daughter here? Only if you want to. I just thought... She trailed off. Never mind. Forget I said anything. No, wait. Ethan walked back toward the porch. Why? Because you talk about her like she's the most important thing in your life. And I'd like to meet her. That's all. Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just nodded. I'll think about it. Okay. He got in his truck and drove down the mountain, his mind spinning the entire way. That night, after Sophie went to bed, Ethan sat on the couch with a beer he didn't drink and thought about everything that had happened in the past week. The attack, the fear, the way Arya had looked at him in the kitchen, asking him to stay. And now this, an invitation, not just to finish the job, but to bring Sophie into it. That changed things, because if Sophie met Arya, if she got attached and then it didn't work out, whatever it was, Sophie would be the one who got hurt. Ethan couldn't let that happen, but he also couldn't ignore the fact that for the first time in 4 years, he felt something other than numb. His phone buzzed. Another text from Arya. Sorry if I overstepped. I didn't mean to make things weird. Ethan stared at the message, then typed back. You didn't. I'm just careful with Sophie. I understand. A pause. Then, for what it's worth, I think you're a great dad. Ethan smiled despite himself. Thanks. See you tomorrow? Yeah, see you tomorrow. He set the phone down and leaned back against the couch. Tomorrow. And the day after that. And however many days it took to finish the job and figure out what the hell he was doing. Because the truth was, Ethan Cole was falling, and he had no idea how to stop. The last repair took 3 more days instead of 2, not because the work was complicated, but because Ethan kept finding excuses to slow down. A loose floorboard in the hallway, a cabinet door that didn't close right, a window that stuck when you tried to open it. Arya didn't call him on it. She just brought him coffee every morning and sat with him during lunch, asking questions about carpentry and construction like she was genuinely interested. Maybe she was, or maybe she was making excuses too. On the 3rd day, Ethan was finishing the last of the trim work in the living room when Arya came downstairs wearing hiking boots and a jacket. I'm going for a walk, she said. Want to come? Ethan looked at the baseboard he'd been staring at for 20 minutes, trying to decide if it needed another coat of stain. It didn't. Sure. They took the trail behind the cabin, the one Arya had mentioned. It wound through dense pine forest, climbing gradually toward a ridge that overlooked the valley. The air smelled like sap and wet earth. Birds called from the branches overhead. I come out here when I'm stuck, Arya said, stepping over a fallen log. Something about walking helps me think. What are you stuck on now? Everything. The book. What happens next? Whether I should stay here or sell the place and move back to the city. Ethan glanced at her. You thinking about leaving? I don't know. Part of me thinks staying is stupid, too isolated, too much risk, but another part of me thinks running would be worse. Why? Because I've been running my whole life from bad relationships, from people who wanted things from me, from my own fear. She paused, looking out through the trees. I'm tired of it. They walked in silence for a while. The trail opened up onto a rocky outcrop with a view that stretched for miles. Mountains layered into the distance, blue and hazy under the afternoon sun. Arya sat on a flat boulder near the edge. Ethan sat beside her, keeping a careful distance. You ever feel like you're living someone else's life? She asked. How do you mean? Like the person everyone sees isn't really you. It's just a version you put together because it's easier than showing them the real thing. Ethan thought about that. Yeah, I know what you mean. What's your version? The guy who's got it together. The single dad who handles everything without complaining. The one who doesn't need help. But that's not true. No, it's not. He picked up a small rock and tossed it off the edge, watching it disappear into the trees below. I'm barely keeping it together most days. I forget to pick up my kid from school. I burn breakfast. I lie awake at night wondering if I'm screwing her up by not being enough. You're enough, Arya said quietly. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because Sophie wouldn't look at you the way she does if you weren't. Ethan turned to her. You've never met Sophie. I know, but I've seen the way you talk about her. That's not a man who's failing. That's a man who loves his daughter more than anything. Ethan's throat tightened. He looked away, focusing on the view instead of the emotion trying to crack through. What about you? What's your version? Arya leaned back on her hands. The brilliant, untouchable author. The woman who doesn't need anyone. Who built an empire out of words and doesn't apologize for it. But I'm lonely, and I'm scared, and I don't know how to let people in without them taking pieces of me I can't get back. Is that what happened with other people? Every time. Boyfriends who wanted me to fund their startups, friends who only called when they needed something, family who resented my success and made sure I knew it. She paused. After a while, you stop trying. It's easier to be alone. But you're not alone now. She looked at him. No, I'm not. The weight of that statement settled between them. Ethan knew he should say something, break the tension, steer the conversation somewhere safer, but he didn't want to. For the first time in years, he wanted to stay exactly where he was. I should bring Sophie up here, he said finally. She'd love this view. Arya smiled. I meant what I said. You're both welcome any time. Even after the job's done? Especially after. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that, so he just nodded, and they sat there together, watching the sun move lower in the sky. When they got back to the cabin, Ethan's phone was ringing. He pulled it out, saw Barbara's name, and felt his stomach drop. She only called during the day if something was wrong. I have to take this, he said. Arya nodded and went inside. Ethan answered. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Relax. Barbara's voice was clipped, annoyed. I'm calling because Sophie asked if she could have a play date this weekend. I told her I'd check with you first. A play date with who? Emma from her class. Apparently they've been planning it for weeks and you forgot. Ethan closed his eyes. He had forgotten. Completely. Yeah, that's fine. You sure? Because you've been pretty distracted lately. I'm sure. Where are you right now? Working. At the cabin? Yeah. There was a pause. Then Barbara said, You've been spending a lot of time up there. It's a big job. Huh. Her tone made it clear she didn't believe him. Just don't forget about Sophie. She needs you present, Ethan, not halfway up a mountain. I know. Do you? Because Sarah... Don't. His voice came out sharper than he meant it to. Don't bring Sarah into this. Barbara went quiet. Then, softer. I'm not trying to fight with you. I'm just worried. I know, but I've got it under control. Okay, if you say so. They hung up. Ethan stood there for a moment, staring at his phone, feeling the weight of guilt press down on his chest. Barbara was right. He had been distracted, and Sophie was paying the price. When he went back inside, Arya was in the kitchen pouring 2 glasses of water. She handed him one. Everything okay? Yeah, just my mother-in-law reminding me I'm a terrible father. She didn't say that. She didn't have to. Arya leaned against the counter. You're not terrible. You're human. There's a difference. Sophie doesn't see it that way. Sophie's 8. She doesn't see a lot of things, but she will, eventually. Arya took a sip of water. My parents worked all the time when I was a kid. I resented them for it. Thought they cared more about their careers than me. Did they? Maybe. I don't know, but I understand it now. They were trying to give me a better life than they had. Sometimes that means sacrifice. Sometimes it means not being there for every little thing. That doesn't make it easier. No, but it makes it forgivable. Ethan set his glass down. I should go. Finish up tomorrow. You don't have to. The work's basically done. There's still a few things. Ethan. She said his name softly, and he stopped. If you want to keep coming back, just say so. You don't need an excuse. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the same uncertainty he felt reflected back, the same fear of wanting something that might not work, the same hope that maybe it could. I want to keep coming back, he said. Then do. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I have a daughter who needs stability, and you have a life that's nothing like mine, and I don't know how to make those two things fit. Arya crossed her arms. So you're just going to walk away? I don't want to, but I don't know what the alternative is. The alternative is trying, seeing what happens, not deciding it's doomed before we even start. We. Ethan's heart was pounding now. There's a we? Arya hesitated, then nodded. I think so. If you want there to be. Ethan didn't answer right away, because the truth was he did want that, more than he'd wanted anything in a long time. But wanting something and being ready for it were two different things. I need to think about it, he said finally. Arya's face fell, just slightly, but she nodded. Okay, take your time. Ethan grabbed his toolbox and headed for the door. But before he left, he turned back. For what it's worth, I'm glad I came back that night, during the storm. Me too. He drove home with his mind spinning. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he'd talked himself in and out of calling Arya a dozen times. In the end, he didn't. He went inside, made dinner for Sophie, helped her with her homework, and pretended everything was normal. But that night, after Sophie went to bed, he sat on the couch and let himself imagine what it would be like, bringing Sophie to the cabin, introducing her to Arya, building something that wasn't just about him and his fear. It felt impossible, but it also felt right. The next morning, Ethan woke up to a text from Arya. I have a proposition. Hear me out before you say no. He stared at the message, already dreading whatever came next. What kind of proposition? Bring Sophie this weekend, not as a job, just as a visit. Let her see the cabin, hike the trail, meet me. No pressure, just see how it goes. Ethan's first instinct was to say no, to keep Sophie separate from this, to protect her from something that might not last. But then he thought about what Arya had said yesterday, about running, about fear, about never giving things a chance because you were too afraid they'd fail. He typed back, I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. He spent the rest of the day working on a job site across town, framing out a new edition for a client who wanted everything done yesterday. The work was loud, physical, mindless, exactly what he needed. But by the time he picked Sophie up from school, he'd made a decision. How do you feel about going on a hike this weekend? He asked as they drove home. Sophie looked up from her book. A hike where? Up in the mountains. There's a trail I think you'd like. Is it the cabin, the one where you've been working? Ethan hesitated. Yeah. Will the book lady be there? Her name's Arya, and yeah, she'll be there. Sophie was quiet for a moment, then she said, Do you like her? I don't really know her yet. But do you want to? Ethan glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Would that be okay? If I did? Sophie shrugged. I guess. As long as she's nice. She is. Then okay. It was that simple for her. No fear, no overthinking, just okay. Ethan wished he could be more like that. Saturday morning came too fast. Ethan packed sandwiches, water bottles, and Sophie's favorite snacks into a backpack. Sophie wore her hiking boots and the purple jacket she'd gotten for her birthday. She was nervous. Ethan could tell by the way she kept adjusting her ponytail. You don't have to come if you don't want to, he said as they got in the truck. I want to. What if she doesn't like me? She'll like you, I promise. How do you know? Because you're amazing, and she's smart enough to see that. Sophie smiled a little. Okay. They drove up the mountain in comfortable silence. When the cabin came into view, Sophie pressed her face against the window. Whoa, she lives here? Yeah. It's huge. It's nice. She must be really rich. She's successful. There's a difference. Sophie gave him a look. That sounds like something a grown-up says when they're uncomfortable talking about money. Ethan laughed despite himself. You're too smart for your own good. I know. Arya was waiting on the porch when they pulled up. She was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt, her hair down, looking more relaxed than Ethan had ever seen her. She waved as they got out of the truck. Sophie grabbed Ethan's hand, suddenly shy. It's okay, he said quietly. Just be yourself. They walked up to the porch together. Arya smiled at Sophie, crouching down slightly so they were eye level. You must be Sophie. I'm Arya. Sophie nodded, not letting go of Ethan's hand. Your dad's told me a lot about you, Arya continued. He says you're really good at soccer. I'm okay, Sophie said quietly. Better than okay, Ethan added. She scored 2 goals last game. That's impressive, Arya said. I was terrible at sports, still am. Sophie looked up at her, a little less nervous. Really? Really. I tried to play volleyball in high school and gave myself a black eye with the ball. It was not my finest moment. Sophie giggled. That's kind of funny. It was extremely funny, for everyone except me. The tension broke. Sophie let go of Ethan's hand and stepped a little closer. Dad said there's a trail. He shot. There is. It's one of my favorite places. Want to see it? Yeah. Arya stood and looked at Ethan. He nodded, and they headed out. The hike was easier than Ethan expected. Sophie talked the whole way, asking Arya questions about the cabin, the forest, what it was like to be a writer. Arya answered every question patiently, never talking down to her, treating her like an actual person instead of just a kid. When they reached the outcrop with the view, Sophie gasped. This is so cool. I thought you'd like it, Arya said. They sat on the rocks and ate sandwiches while Sophie pointed out shapes in the clouds. Ethan watched them together, something tight in his chest loosening for the first time in days. This could work. Maybe. On the way back, Sophie walked ahead singing some song Ethan didn't recognize. Arya fell into step beside him. She's great, Arya said quietly. Yeah, she is. You're lucky. I know. They walked in silence for a moment. Then Arya said, Thank you for bringing her. Thank you for inviting us. Does this mean you're not walking away? Ethan looked at her. I don't know, but I'm not walking away today. That's good enough for me. When they got back to the cabin, Sophie asked if she could see where Arya worked. Arya hesitated, then nodded and led her inside to the office. Ethan watched through the window as Sophie looked at the bookshelves, asking questions, touching the spines carefully like they were fragile. Arya showed her the desk where she wrote, the laptop, the stack of notebooks filled with ideas. And then Sophie said something that made Arya laugh, really laugh, the kind of laugh that came from somewhere genuine. Ethan felt it then. The shift, the realization that this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Sophie, too, about whether this woman standing in that office could be part of their lives without breaking what they'd built. He didn't have the answer yet, but for the first time he thought maybe he didn't need one right now. When it was time to leave, Sophie hugged Arya without being prompted. Thanks for showing me the trail. Anytime, Arya said, hugging her back. You're welcome here whenever you want. Sophie looked up at Ethan. Can we come back? Yeah, sweetheart. We can come back. They drove home as the sun was setting, the sky turning orange and pink. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat, her head resting against the window. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Arya. That was perfect. Thank you. He smiled and typed back. She liked you. I liked her too. And for the record, I like you. Ethan stared at the message for a long time, then wrote, I like you too. Let's figure this out. Yeah, let's. The following week blurred together. Ethan took on 2 more jobs, both of them demanding and complicated. But every night, he texted Arya. Nothing heavy, just small things. How her writing went. How Sophie's day was. What they were having for dinner. It felt normal, easy. Like something that had been there all along, just waiting for them to notice. On Thursday, Arya called instead of texting. I have a favor to ask. Okay. I have a book signing in Denver on Saturday. My publicist insists I go, but I really don't want to go alone. Ethan's heart skipped. You want me to come? Only if you want to. I know it's last minute, and it's probably not your thing, but I'll come. She went quiet. Then, really? Yeah. Sophie's with her grandparents this weekend anyway. I'm free. Okay, good. Great. I'll pick you up Saturday morning. You don't have to. I want to. They hung up, and Ethan sat there, staring at his phone, realizing he'd just agreed to spend an entire day in Arya's world, a world he knew nothing about. He was terrified. But he was also curious. Saturday morning, Arya pulled up in a sleek black SUV that probably cost more than Ethan's truck and house combined. She wore a dress, dark blue, simple, elegant, and looked every bit the successful author she was. Ethan suddenly felt underdressed in his jeans and button-down shirt. "You look great," Arya said when he got in. "You're lying, but I appreciate it." She smiled. "I'm not lying. You look like you." "Is that a compliment?" "It is." They drove to Denver, talking about nothing and everything. Arya was nervous. Ethan could tell by the way she kept adjusting the rearview mirror and tapping her fingers on the steering wheel. "You do this a lot?" he asked. "Book signings?" "Yeah, too many." "Then why are you nervous?" "Because I hate them. All those people expecting me to be brilliant and charming and perfect. It's exhausting. So don't be perfect, just be you." She glanced at him. "That's easier said than done." "Not really. You were you with Sophie last weekend. That was perfect." Arya smiled. She made it easy. "Then pretend everyone there is Sophie." "That's terrible advice." "Probably, but it's all I've got." She laughed. And just like that, some of the tension left her shoulders. The signing was at a bookstore in downtown Denver. By the time they arrived, a line of people was already wrapped around the block. Arya stared at them through the windshield. "I can't do this," she said quietly. "Yes, you can. What if I freeze? What if I say something stupid? Then you say something stupid. It's not the end of the world." She looked at him. "You're really bad at pep talks." "I know, but I'm here, and that counts for something, right?" She reached over and squeezed his hand. "Yeah, it does." They went inside. A publicist immediately swept Arya away, leaving Ethan standing awkwardly near the door. He found a corner and watched as Arya sat at a table stacked with books, signing copies and talking to readers. She was good at it, gracious, patient. Every person who came up to her left, smiling. But Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the effort it took to keep that smile in place. After 2 hours, the line finally ended. Arya stood, stretched, and walked over to him. "How'd I do?" she asked. "You were great." "Liar. I'm serious. You made every single person feel like they mattered. That's the job." "No, that's you." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Let's get out of here." They drove back toward the mountains, but instead of going to the cabin, Arya pulled off at a small diner near the highway. They ordered burgers and fries and sat in a booth by the window. "This is nice," Arya said, biting into her burger. "Normal." "You don't do normal often?" "Not really. My life's either chaos or isolation. Not much in between." "Sounds lonely." "It is." She wiped ketchup off her fingers. "But today wasn't. Today was good." "Yeah, it was." They ate in comfortable silence, and when they finished, Arya drove him home. She parked in his driveway but didn't turn off the engine. "Thank you," she said, "for coming, for being there." "Anytime." She looked at him. "I mean it, Ethan. You made today better." He didn't know what to say, so he just leaned over and kissed her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't smooth, but it was real. When they pulled apart, Arya was smiling. "Took you long enough." "Yeah, I'm slow." "I noticed." He got out of the car, but before he closed the door, he said, "I want to try this, for real, if you do." Arya's smile widened. "Yeah, I do." "Good." He watched her drive away, his heart pounding, his mind racing. And for the first time in 4 years, Ethan Cole felt like he was finally moving forward instead of just surviving. The first 2 weeks after that kiss were the best Ethan had felt in years. He and Arya fell into an easy rhythm. She'd come down to town for dinner on weeknights when Sophie was with Barbara. Weekends, they'd go up to the cabin, the three of them hiking or playing board games by the fire. Sophie adored Arya, and Arya seemed genuinely happy around Sophie in a way that felt natural, not forced. But then reality started creeping in. It started small. A photographer outside the diner where they'd gone for lunch. Arya noticed him first, her whole body going tense as she spotted the camera aimed at them through the window. "We need to go," she said, standing abruptly. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked. "Just trust me. We need to leave. Now." They left cash on the table and walked out quickly. The photographer followed them to Ethan's truck, snapping pictures the entire time. Arya kept her head down, but Ethan could see her hands shaking. "Who was that?" he asked once they were driving away. "Paparazzi? Freelance, probably. Sells photos to gossip sites. Why would they care about us having lunch?" Arya looked at him like he'd asked why the sky was blue. "Because I'm with someone. That's news. That's a story they can spin however they want. That's insane. That's my life." 2 days later, the photos were online. The headline read, "Billionaire author Arya Vaughn steps out with mystery man." The article speculated about who Ethan was, where they'd met, whether this was serious or just a fling. Someone had already dug up his name, his business, even a photo of his truck with the company logo visible. Ethan stared at his phone, his stomach sinking. How did they find all this? "They always do," Arya said. They were at her cabin, sitting in the living room. She looked exhausted. "I'm sorry. I should have warned you this would happen. It's not your fault." "It kind of is. This is what comes with being near me. I don't care about some stupid article. You will, when it gets worse. How much worse can it get?" Arya didn't answer, but the look on her face told him everything he needed to know. The next week, a reporter showed up at Ethan's job site. She was young, eager, holding a recorder like a weapon. "Mr. Cole, can you comment on your relationship with Arya Vaughn? How long have you two been together? Is it serious?" Ethan set down his drill. "No comment." "Have you met her family? Has she met your daughter?" "I said no comment." "There are rumors you were at her cabin during the attack last month. Can you confirm? Get off this property before I call the cops." The reporter left, but she wasn't the last. Over the next few days, 3 more showed up. One called his phone. Another cornered him at the grocery store. The third approached Barbara at Sophie's school. That's when Ethan knew this had gone too far. He drove up to the cabin that night without calling ahead. Arya answered the door in sweatpants and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy bun. She looked surprised to see him. "I didn't know you were coming," she said. "We need to talk." Her face fell. "Okay, come in." They sat in the living room. Ethan didn't waste time. "A reporter talked to Barbara today, at Sophie's school." Arya's eyes widened. "What did they say?" "Ask questions about me, about us, about whether Sophie's been around you." "I'm so sorry." "This isn't about sorry. This is about my daughter. I can handle reporters following me around. I can handle my name on some website, but I can't have them going after Sophie." "I know. I'll call my lawyer. We can get a restraining order." "That's not going to fix this. You know that." Arya went very still. "What are you saying?" Ethan hated the words before they even left his mouth. "I'm saying maybe we need to slow down. Take a step back until this blows over." "It won't blow over. It'll just get worse, especially if we keep seeing each other." "Then what do you want me to do? Keep putting Sophie at risk?" "No, of course not." Arya's voice cracked. "But stepping back isn't going to make them leave you alone. They already know who you are. The damage is done." "So what? We just keep going and hope they lose interest?" "Yes, that's exactly what we do. Because if we stop now, if we let them scare us into hiding, they win." Ethan stood, pacing. "This isn't about winning or losing. This is about protecting my kid. I understand that, but running isn't protection. It's just fear. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Then don't tell me we need to slow down when what you really mean is you want to end this." The words hung between them like a blade. Ethan stopped pacing, his chest tight. "That's not what I said." "But it's what you meant." "No, it's not." "Then what do you want, Ethan? Because I can't read your mind." He told. He didn't know how to answer that, because the truth was messy and complicated. He wanted Arya. He wanted this life they were building, but he also wanted Sophie safe. And he didn't know how to have both. "I need time," he said finally, "to figure this out." Arya's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "How much time?" "I don't know. Days, weeks, months? I don't know." She nodded slowly like she'd expected this. "Okay, take your time. But don't expect me to wait forever." "Arya, I'm serious. I've spent my whole life waiting for people to decide I'm worth the trouble. I'm not doing it again. Ethan wanted to tell her she was worth it, that she was worth everything, but the words wouldn't come. So he just grabbed his jacket and left. The drive home was the longest of his life. The next few weeks were hell. Ethan threw himself into work, taking every job he could find, staying late, working weekends. Anything to avoid thinking about Arya, about the look on her face when he walked out. Sophie noticed immediately. "Why aren't we going to the cabin anymore?" "I've been busy with work. Is Arya okay?" "She's fine." "Did you guys have a fight?" Ethan looked at her across the dinner table. "Why would you think that?" "Because you're sad, and you only get sad when something's wrong." "I'm not sad." "Yes, you are. You have the same face you had after Mom died." Ethan's chest constricted. "Sophie, I liked her, Dad. I liked Arya, and I think she liked us too." "I know you did." "Then why aren't we seeing her?" "It's complicated. That's what grown-ups say when they don't want to explain." "She wasn't wrong." Ethan set down his fork. "There are people who want to know about Arya, reporters, and they've been bothering us because of it. I'm trying to keep you safe." "From reporters?" "Yeah. But they're just asking questions. They're not dangerous." "They can be, if they write the wrong things, if they make our lives public." Sophie frowned. "So you're not seeing Arya to protect me?" "Yeah." "That's dumb." "Excuse me?" "It's dumb. Arya makes you happy, and you make her happy. Why does it matter what some reporter says?" "Because it affects you." "So, I don't care. I'd rather have you happy than have you protecting me from something that's not even scary." Ethan stared at his daughter, 8 years old and wiser than he'd ever be. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You just don't listen." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You're right. I'm sorry." "So are you going to fix it?" "I don't know if I can." "You won't know unless you try." That night, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation he'd had with Arya. Every moment, every laugh. Every time she'd looked at him like he was more than just some contractor. He'd screwed up, badly, and he didn't know how to fix it. But Sophie was right. He had to try. The next morning, Ethan drove up to the cabin. He didn't call ahead, didn't text, just showed up and knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. "Arya, it's me." Still nothing. He walked around to the side of the cabin, peering through windows. The lights were off. Her car was gone. The place looked empty. Ethan pulled out his phone and called her. It went straight to voicemail. He tried texting. No response. A cold dread settled in his stomach. Where was she? He called her assistant, a woman named Morgan he'd met once at the book signing. She answered on the third ring. "This is Morgan." "Hi, it's Ethan Cole. I'm trying to reach Arya. Do you know where she is?" There was a pause. "She didn't tell you." "Tell me what?" "She's in New York, left 3 days ago. Said she needed space to finish her book." Ethan's heart sank. "When's she coming back?" "She didn't say, but she canceled all her upcoming appearances and put the cabin up for rent. So, I'm guessing not anytime soon." "She put the cabin up for rent?" "Yeah. Listed it yesterday." Ethan thanked her and hung up. He stood there in the driveway staring at the cabin, feeling like the ground had just opened up beneath him. She'd left, without a word, without even a goodbye, and it was his fault. He drove home in a daze. When he got there, Barbara's car was in the driveway. She was sitting on the porch steps with Sophie, both of them eating popsicles. "What are you doing here?" Ethan asked. Barbara stood. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About you being an idiot." Ethan glanced at Sophie. "Can we do this later?" "No, because you're going to keep making excuses and pushing this off until it's too late. So we're doing this now." Barbara crossed her arms. "Sophie told me about Arya." "She did?" "Yeah. And she told me you ended things because you were worried about reporters." "I didn't end things. You ran, just like you always do when things get hard." Ethan bristled. "I'm protecting my daughter." "No. You're protecting yourself from getting hurt, from losing someone again, and you're using Sophie as an excuse. That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I'm standing, you met someone who makes you happy for the first time since Sarah died, and you threw it away because you're scared. Ethan looked at Sophie. She was watching him with those big, knowing eyes. I'm not scared, he said, but even he didn't believe it. Yes, you are, Barbara said, and I get it. Losing Sarah destroyed you. It destroyed all of us. But she wouldn't want you to spend the rest of your life alone because you're afraid of losing someone else. You don't know what she'd want. Yes, I do. She was my daughter, and she loved you more than anything. She'd want you to be happy, to move on, to let yourself love someone again. Ethan's throat tightened. What if I lose her too? Then you lose her, and it'll hurt like hell, but at least you'll have tried. At least you'll have lived. Sophie stood and walked over to him. Dad, you always tell me to be brave, to try new things, even if I'm scared. Why don't you do that? Ethan crouched down so they were eye level. Because it's different when you're a grown-up. No, it's not. Scared is scared. You just have to decide if it's worth it. And you think Arya's worth it? I think you think she is, and that's what matters. Ethan pulled Sophie into a hug, holding her tight. When did you get so wise? I've been telling you, you just don't listen. Barbara smiled. So what are you going to do? Ethan stood. I'm going to fix this. Good, because if you don't, I will, and I'll embarrass you while I do it. Ethan almost laughed. I believe you. He spent the rest of the day trying to figure out how to reach Arya. He called Morgan again, but she wouldn't give him Arya's address in New York. He tried emailing, texting, calling, nothing. Finally, in desperation, he called the publisher listed on the back of one of Arya's books. After being transferred 3 times, he got through to someone who claimed to know her. I need to talk to Arya Vaughn, Ethan said. It's urgent. I'm sorry, but Ms. Vaughn isn't taking unsolicited calls. I'm not unsolicited, We're together. Or we were. I need to talk to her. If you were together, you'd have her number. I do have her number. She's not answering. Then maybe she doesn't want to talk to you. The line went dead. Ethan sat there staring at his phone, feeling utterly helpless. He'd burned the bridge, and now he had no way to cross back. But then he remembered something Arya had said during one of their hikes. About a coffee shop in Manhattan she loved, a place she went when she needed to think. The name had stuck with him because it was weird. The Blue Door Cafe. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. 2 days later, Ethan was on a plane to New York. Barbara agreed to watch Sophie for the weekend. Sophie made him promise to bring Arya back. Ethan said he'd try. New York was overwhelming. Too many people, too much noise, everything moving too fast. Ethan had been once, years ago, and hated it. This trip wasn't changing his mind. He found the Blue Door Cafe in the West Village. It was small, cozy, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in bookshelves. Ethan ordered a coffee and sat by the window watching the door. He waited for 2 hours. Nothing. He came back the next morning. Waited another 3 hours. Still nothing. By the 3rd day, he was starting to think this was hopeless. But he ordered another coffee and sat down anyway. And then the door opened, and Arya walked in. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her hair was shorter, cut just above her shoulders. She wore jeans and a sweater, sunglasses, even though it was overcast. She didn't see him at first. She ordered a coffee and turned toward the seating area. And then she froze. Ethan stood. Hi. Arya stared at him. What are you doing here? I needed to see you. How did you even know where to find me? You mentioned this place once. I took a chance. She looked around like she was considering leaving, but then she sighed and sat down at his table. You shouldn't have come. I know, but I did anyway. Why? Because I was an idiot. And I'm sorry. Arya took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. You can't just show up and apologize and expect everything to be okay. I know, but I had to try. Ethan leaned forward. I was scared. You were right. I was terrified of losing you, so I pushed you away first. And that was stupid and cowardly, and I hate that I hurt you. You did hurt me. A lot. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you let me. Arya shook her head. It's not that simple, Ethan. Your life and mine, they don't fit. You saw what happened with the reporters. That's never going to stop. I don't care. You say that now. But what about when it gets worse? What about when Sophie's name ends up in some article? What about when your business suffers because people won't stop asking questions? Then we deal with it, together. You don't know what you're asking for. Yes, I do. I'm asking for you, for us, for a chance to build something real, even if it's messy and hard and public. Arya's eyes filled with tears. Why? Why now? Why come all the way here when you could have just let me go? Because Sophie told me I was being dumb, and Barbara told me I was scared, and they were both right. He reached across the table and took her hand. I don't want to be scared anymore. I want to be with you, if you'll have me. Arya looked down at their hands. I don't know if I can do this again. If you leave, I won't. I promise. I'm not walking away this time. Not ever. She looked up at him, searching his face for something. Truth, maybe. Or certainty. Finally, she said, Okay? Okay? Yeah, okay. A small smile broke through the tears. But if you screw this up again, I'm keeping your drill. Ethan laughed. Deal. They sat there for a long time, just holding hands across the table, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan felt like he could breathe again. They spent the rest of the weekend in New York. Arya showed him her favorite places. They walked through Central Park, ate pizza at a hole-in-the-wall place in Brooklyn, saw a play neither of them understood, but both pretended to enjoy. On Sunday night, sitting in Arya's tiny apartment overlooking the city, she said, I'm coming back to the cabin. You sure? Yeah, I thought leaving would help, but it just made me realize how much I miss it, how much I miss you. What about the book? I can finish it anywhere, and honestly, I write better when I'm not miserable. Ethan pulled her close. I'm glad. Me too. They flew back to Colorado together the next day. When they landed, Sophie was waiting at the airport with Barbara, holding a sign that said, Welcome home, Arya, in glitter and marker. Arya started crying the moment she saw it. Sophie ran up and hugged her. I missed you. I missed you too, sweetheart. Barbara smiled at Ethan. You did good, kid. Thanks. Don't screw it up again. I won't. And for the first time in years, Ethan believed that. Not because everything was perfect, but because he'd finally stopped running from the things that scared him. He'd finally chosen to stay. The first month after Arya came back was easier than Ethan expected. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but manageable. They learned to navigate the attention, the stares, the occasional whispered comment when they went out to dinner. Arya taught him how to ignore cameras, how to say no comment without sounding rude, how to keep living even when people were watching. Sophie adjusted faster than either of them. She liked having Arya around, liked the way their little family was expanding into something new. On weekends, they'd drive up to the cabin and spend entire days doing nothing, hiking, cooking, playing cards by the fire. Normal things, the kind of things Ethan had stopped believing he could have. But in the back of his mind, he kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for something to go wrong. Because in his experience, good things didn't last. It started with a phone call. Ethan was at a job site, installing cabinets in a kitchen remodel, when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Cole? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. Yeah? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Denver Police Department. We need to speak with you regarding the incident at Ms. Vaughn's cabin last month. Ethan's stomach dropped. I already gave my statement. I understand, but there's been a development. The suspect, Daniel Hartman, is requesting a meeting with you. Why would I meet with him? He says he has information about additional threats made against Ms. Vaughn. Threats we weren't aware of. He's willing to cooperate, but only if you're present. That doesn't make sense. I agree, but he's insistent. And given the nature of the original attack, we think it's worth pursuing. Ethan closed his eyes. When? Tomorrow. 2 p.m., Denver County Jail. I'll be there. He hung up and stood there for a moment, staring at the half-installed cabinet. Then he called Arya. She answered on the first ring. Hey, what's up? The police called. They want me to meet with the guy who attacked you. Silence. Then, why? He says he has information about other threats, won't talk unless I'm there. That's insane. You're not going. I have to. No, you don't. Let the police handle it. Arya, if there are other people out there planning something, we need to know. Then let them find out without putting you in a room with that psychopath. I'll be fine. It's a jail. There'll be guards, glass between us. He can't hurt me. That's not the point. Then what is? She was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't want you near him. I don't want him anywhere near our lives. He's already in our lives, has been since that night. Maybe this is how we get him out. Arya sighed. I'm coming with you. You don't have to. I'm coming. If you're going, I'm going. Ethan didn't argue. He knew better. The next day they drove to Denver together. Neither of them said much. Arya stared out the window, her jaw tight, her hands clenched in her lap. Ethan kept glancing at her, wanting to say something comforting, but not knowing what. When they arrived at the jail, Detective Chen met them in the lobby. She was younger than Ethan expected, maybe mid-30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Thank you for coming, she said, shaking their hands. I want to be clear, you don't have to do this. Hartman has no leverage here. If you're uncomfortable, we can end this right now. What exactly does he want? Arya asked. To talk. That's all he said. He claims he has information about other individuals who've made threats against you, Ms. Vaughn. Names, online aliases, potential locations. But he'll only share it if Mr. Cole is present. Why Ethan? Arya's voice was sharp. What does he have to do with any of this? I don't know. Hartman wouldn't elaborate. Ethan looked at Arya. We should do it. Hear what he has to say. I don't like this. Neither do I. But if there are other people out there, fine. Arya cut him off. But I'm going in too. Detective Chen hesitated. That might not be a good idea. I don't care. If Ethan's going in, I'm going in. Ms. Vaughn, it's not up for debate. Chen looked at Ethan, who just nodded. She sighed. All right, but I'll be in the room the entire time. And if anything goes sideways, we're done. Understood? They both nodded. The meeting room was small, sterile, with white walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly. A metal table sat in the center, bolted to the floor, 2 chairs on one side, one on the other. Ethan and Arya sat. Chen stood near the door, arms crossed. A moment later, the door on the opposite side opened, and Daniel Hartman was let in. He looked different than Ethan remembered, smaller, thinner. His hair was greasy, his face pale and gaunt. His right hand was wrapped in a cast, the one Ethan had hit with the hammer. He wore an orange jumpsuit and shackles on his wrists and ankles. When he saw Arya, his eyes lit up. Not with anger, with something worse. Reverence. Arya, he said, his voice hoarse. You came. Arya didn't respond. Her face was stone. Hartman sat down, his shackles clinking against the table. He looked at Ethan. You're the one who stopped me. Yeah. I didn't expect that. I thought you'd run. Most people would have. I'm not most people. Hartman smiled. It was unsettling. No, you're not. He leaned forward slightly. That's why I wanted to talk to you, because you understand. Understand what? What it's like to love someone so much you'd do anything for them, even if it destroys you. Ethan's jaw tightened. I don't love you, and you don't love Arya. You're obsessed with her. There's a difference. Is there? Hartman's gaze shifted to Arya. I've read everything you've written, every book, every interview, every post. I know you better than anyone. I know what you're afraid of, what you want, what you need. You don't know anything about me, Arya said, her voice cold. I know you changed the ending. You killed him when he was supposed to live. You betrayed the story. It's my story. I can do whatever I want with it. No, it's not just yours. It belongs to everyone who reads it, everyone who sees themselves in it. You don't get to take that away. That's exactly what I get to do. It's fiction. It's not real. Hartman's face darkened. It's real to me. Detective Chen stepped forward. Hartman, you said you had information. Let's hear it. Hartman didn't look away from Arya. There are others, people who feel the way I do, who think you owe them something. I've been in contact with them. Online forums, message boards. They're planning something. Ethan's blood ran cold. Planning what? I don't know exactly, but they're angry, and they're organized, more than I was. Give us names, Chen said. Hartman shook his head. Not until I get something in return. You're not in a position to negotiate. Yes, I am, because without me you won't find them, and when they strike, it'll be worse than anything I did. What do you want? Arya asked. Hartman looked at her. I want you to finish the story. The real ending, the one you were supposed to write. You're insane. Maybe, but that's my offer. Write the ending and I'll give you the names. Arya stood abruptly. We're done here. Arya, wait. Ethan started, but she was already walking toward the door. Hartman's voice followed her. You can't run from this. They won't stop. Not until you give them what they want. Arya spun around. I don't owe you anything. Not the ending. Not an explanation. Nothing. You're a criminal, a stalker, and you don't get to make demands. Then people will get hurt, and it'll be your fault. Arya's face twisted with rage. She took a step toward him, and Chen moved to intercept, but Ethan got there first. Let's go, he said, gently taking Arya's arm. He's not worth it. Arya let him guide her out of the room, but as they left, Hartman called out one last time. You think he'll protect you forever? He won't, because eventually you'll realize he's just another person you'll lose. Ethan didn't look back. In the hallway, Arya was shaking, not with fear, with fury. I'm not writing that ending, she said. I don't care what he says. I'm not giving him what he wants. I'm not asking you to. Good, because I won't do it. Not for him, not for anyone. Detective Chen caught up with them. We'll follow up on the threats, see what we can verify. But without names, it'll take time. How much time? Ethan asked. I don't know. Could be weeks. Could be months. And in the meantime, you stay vigilant, report anything suspicious, and consider increasing security. Arya laughed bitterly. Increase security. Great. That's exactly the life I want to live. Ms. Vaughn, I'm done. I'm done with this conversation. Done with him. Done with all of it. She walked away, heading for the exit. Ethan thanked Chen and followed. The drive back was silent. Arya stared out the window, her arms crossed, her entire body radiating tension. Ethan wanted to say something, but every word felt inadequate. Finally, halfway home, Arya spoke. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Live like this, always looking over my shoulder, always wondering if someone's watching, if someone's planning something. We'll figure it out. How? How do we figure out something like this? The same way we figured out everything else. Together. Arya shook her head. What if it's not enough? What if he's right? What if there are more people like him out there, and we can't stop them all? Then we deal with them when they show up. But we don't let the fear control us. We don't let them win. Easy to say. I know, but it's true. She looked at him. You're not scared? I'm terrified, every single day, but I'm more scared of losing you than I am of whatever might happen. Arya's eyes filled with tears. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I won't. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'm not going anywhere. She reached over and took his hand, and they drove the rest of the way home like that, holding on to each other. Over the next few weeks, Detective Chen followed up on Hartman's claims. She found evidence of online communities dedicated to Arya's work, some harmless, some disturbing. There were discussions about the ending, debates about what it should have been, anger directed at Arya for ruining the story, but no concrete threats, no names, nothing actionable. It was both a relief and a frustration. Meanwhile, life continued. Ethan worked. Arya wrote. Sophie went to school, played soccer, brought home report cards with straight A's. On the surface, everything looked normal. But underneath, there was tension. Arya was jumpier. She checked the locks twice before bed, looked over her shoulder in parking lots, flinched when strangers approached her in public. Ethan noticed but didn't push. He just stayed close, made sure she knew he was there. One evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Arya came downstairs holding a stack of papers. "What's that?" Ethan asked. "The ending," she said. "The one Hartman wanted." Ethan sat up. "You wrote it?" "No, I found it. It's an old draft from before I changed it." She sat beside him on the couch. "I've been thinking about what he said, about owing people the story. And maybe he's right. He's not right. He's a criminal. I know, but maybe I did take something from people. Maybe I changed the ending because I was scared of what it meant. And maybe that was selfish." "Arya, you don't owe anyone anything. It's your story." "But is it? Once you put it out into the world, does it still belong to you, or does it belong to everyone who reads it?" Ethan took the papers from her hands and set them on the table. "Listen to me. You wrote a story. People read it. Some loved it, some didn't. That's how art works. But the moment you start letting readers dictate what you create, you stop being an artist. You become a puppet." "But what if they're right? What if the ending I wrote was wrong?" "Then it was wrong. But it was yours. And that matters more than being right." Arya looked at him, her expression torn. "I just want this to be over." "It will be, but not by giving in to him." She nodded slowly, then picked up the papers and threw them into the fireplace. They watched them burn together. A month later, Detective Chen called with an update. They'd tracked down 3 individuals from the online forums who'd made explicit threats. All 3 had been arrested. There was no indication of any coordinated plan. Hartman had been lying, or at least exaggerating, to manipulate Arya. The news should have been a relief. And it was. But it also meant they'd spent weeks living in fear over something that might never have materialized. "How do we move forward from this?" Arya asked that night. They were at the cabin, sitting on the deck under a sky full of stars. "We just do," Ethan said, "one day at a time." "That's not very helpful." "I know, but it's all I've got." Arya smiled faintly. "You're terrible at motivational speeches." "So I've been told." She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad you're here." "Me too." They sat in silence for a while. Then Arya said, "I'm thinking about writing a new book. Something different. Something that's just for me." "What kind of book?" "I don't know yet, but something honest. Something that doesn't try to be what people expect." "That sounds good." "Yeah, it does." Ethan kissed the top of her head. "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For not giving up. For not letting them win." "I had help." "Yeah, you did." 3 months later, Arya's new book was finished. She didn't show it to anyone, not her agent, not her publicist, not even Ethan, until it was completely done. Then one evening, she handed him a printed manuscript. "Read it," she said. "Tell me what you think." Ethan read it that night. All of it, cover to cover. And when he finished, he found Arya in the kitchen making tea. "Well?" she asked, not looking at him. "It's beautiful." She turned. "Really?" "Really. It's raw and messy and real. It's you. I don't know if anyone will like it. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. But that's not why you wrote it." "No, it's not." "Then it doesn't matter." Arya smiled, a real smile, the kind that reached her eyes. "Thank you." "For what?" "For reminding me why I started writing in the first place." Ethan pulled her into a hug, and they stood there in the kitchen, holding each other, while the tea kettle whistled on the stove. 6 months after that, Arya published the book. The reviews were mixed. Some critics loved it, others hated it. Readers were divided. But the one thing everyone agreed on was that it was different, bold, uncompromising. And Arya didn't care, because for the first time in her career, she'd written something that was entirely hers. No expectations, no obligations, just words on a page. The book didn't become a bestseller, but it didn't need to. It was enough. 1 year after the attack, Ethan and Arya were back at the cabin for Sophie's 9th birthday. They'd invited a few of her friends, set up a scavenger hunt in the woods. made a cake that was lopsided and covered in too much frosting. It was chaotic and loud and perfect. As the sun set and the kids ran around the yard with flashlights, Arya sat beside Ethan on the porch steps. "This is nice," she said. "Yeah, it is. I never thought I'd have this. A family. People who actually want to be around me. You deserve it. So do you." Ethan looked at her. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "We spent so much time being afraid of losing each other, afraid of what people would think, afraid of everything. But the only thing we should have been afraid of was not trying." Arya smiled. "When did you get so wise?" "Sophie, she's been teaching me. She's a good teacher." "Yeah, she is." They sat there watching Sophie and her friends chase fireflies in the fading light. And Ethan thought about how far they'd come. From that night in the storm, when everything was fear and survival, to this moment, when everything was calm and full. It hadn't been easy. There'd been mistakes, missteps, moments when it would have been easier to walk away. But they hadn't. They'd stayed. They'd fought. They'd chosen each other every single day. And that, Ethan realized, was what love actually was. Not the grand gestures, not the dramatic speeches, just the quiet decision to keep showing up, even when it was hard. Later that night, after the kids had gone home and Sophie was asleep upstairs, Arya found Ethan on the deck. He was staring out at the mountains, a beer in his hand. "Penny for your thoughts," she said, sitting beside him. "Just thinking about how lucky I am." "Lucky how?" "Lucky that I forgot my drill that night. Lucky that I came back. Lucky that you gave me a chance." Arya took his hand. "I'm the lucky one." "How do you figure?" "Because you saw me. Not the author, not the money, just me. And you stayed anyway." "Of course I stayed. You're worth staying for." She kissed him, soft and slow and full of everything they'd been through. When they pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. "I love you," she said. It was the first time either of them had said it out loud. Ethan's chest tightened. "I love you too." They sat there under the stars, holding each other, knowing that tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more reporters, more scrutiny, more moments of doubt. But they'd face them together, because that's what they did now. They stayed. 2 years later, Ethan proposed, not with a grand plan or a perfect moment, just a quiet evening at the cabin, Sophie asleep upstairs, the fire crackling in the hearth. "Marry me," he said. Arya looked at him, surprised. "What?" "Marry me. Not because it's what we're supposed to do, not because it makes sense, but because I want to, because I can't imagine my life without you in it." "You don't have a ring." "I know, I didn't plan this, I realized I don't want to wait anymore." Arya laughed. "You're terrible at proposals." "I know, but I mean it." She kissed him. Yes, I'll marry you." They got married 6 months later. Small ceremony, just family and a few close friends. Sophie was the flower girl. Barbara cried through the entire thing. Arya wore a simple white dress. Ethan wore a suit that didn't quite fit. It was imperfect and beautiful and exactly what they needed. At the reception, Sophie gave a speech. She was 11 now, tall and confident and so much like her mother, it sometimes hurt to look at her. "My dad's the best person I know," she said, reading from a piece of paper she'd written on. "He's not perfect. He burns breakfast a lot. And he's terrible at video games, but he loves harder than anyone I've ever met. And I'm really glad he found Arya, because she makes him happy, and she makes us a family." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Later, as they danced under string lights in the backyard of the cabin, Arya whispered in Ethan's ear, "Thank you." "For what?" "For coming back that night, for saving me, for choosing me." "I didn't save you. We saved each other." She smiled. "Yeah, I guess we did." They danced until the music stopped, and when the night was over and the guests had gone home, they stood on the deck together, watching the sun come up over the mountains. It was a new day, a new beginning, and for the first time in a long time, neither of them was afraid. Because they'd learned something important. Love wasn't about perfection, It wasn't about having all the answers or avoiding all the pain. It was about showing up, staying, choosing each other even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And that was enough. Years later, when people asked Ethan about that night, the storm, the attack, the fear, he'd tell them it was the worst night of his life. And the best. Because it was the night he stopped running, the night he chose to fight, the night he found something worth holding on to, and he never let go. Arya published 3 more books after that. None of them were bestsellers, but they were hers, honest and raw and real, and that mattered more than any accolade. Sophie grew up, graduated high school, went to college, became the kind of person who made Ethan proud every single day. And through it all, the good days and the bad, the chaos and the calm, Ethan and Arya stayed. They built a life together, not a perfect one, but a real one. And in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. A life built on choice, on love, on the quiet courage to keep showing up no matter what. That was their story, messy and imperfect and completely theirs. And it was enough.